My family expects me to host every single holiday, year after year, without ever offering to help or take turns. And while I love them, the pressure, planning, and constant cleanup are becoming overwhelming, and no one seems to care how exhausted or financially drained I feel. For the past 5 years as a 32-year-old, I've taken on the responsibility of hosting every family holiday. This includes major events like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter, and even smaller ones such as Memorial Day. If there's a chance for our relatives to gather, it's always at my house. This wasn't always my role, but after my grandmother passed away, the duty seemed to naturally fall to me. She had hosted for over 3 decades, and I suppose everyone just expected me to continue her tradition. I live alone in a home with a spacious living area and a dining space that's ideal for entertaining. It's not extravagant, but it has ample room for everyone. My older brother, who is 35, lives nearby in a similarly sized dwelling, yet the idea of him taking over as host has never been considered. It's always just been assumed that I would host. He has a spouse and 2 young children, and whenever hosting is mentioned, he dismisses it, claiming his place is too chaotic for a large gathering. Over time, our family has grown. There are now cousins with their own children, and aunts and uncles, some of whom are getting older. A typical holiday means about 20 people in my house. It's lively with children running around, and everyone has their own expectations. They appreciate my cooking, how I arrange the decorations, and how I make everything feel just as Grandma used to. I've tried to maintain everything, acquiring new tablecloths, different Christmas lights, and even those elaborate serving dishes I only use for these events. However, the expenses continue to accumulate. Between the food, beverages, decorations, and small extras to keep the children amused, it's far from inexpensive, and I'm the one covering all the costs. Last year, I calculated the expenditures and realized I'd spent enough to fund a decent vacation for myself, something I haven't done in years because every spare cent appears to go into these gatherings. Around this time last year, I finally gathered the courage to ask my family for a little assistance. Nothing extreme, just a suggestion that perhaps everyone could contribute a small amount for the food or bring a side dish. I brought it up after dinner one evening, thinking it would be a casual discussion. Instead, the room became completely quiet. Everyone simply stared at me as if I'd violated some unwritten rule. My mother quickly changed the subject. My brother made a joke about me being Mr. Moneybags, and that was the end of it. The next thing I knew, I was still paying the entire bill while they brought store-bought desserts and called it a contribution. Last Thanksgiving was somewhat of a breaking point for me. The entire family was eating, drinking, and socializing while I was rushing around making sure the turkey didn't burn and the drinks remained full. The dishwasher decided to stop working halfway through the night, and by the time everyone departed, I was hand-washing dishes until almost 2 a.m. Meanwhile, my family left early, mentioning how tired they were, without a second thought for the mess they left behind. I believe that's when it dawned on me how little time I actually get to enjoy these holidays myself. For my family, it's an opportunity to relax, sit back, and savor a homemade meal in a familiar setting, but for me, it has become a full-time job. I wake up at dawn to begin preparing, and by the time I'm finished cleaning up, it's as if the day has simply vanished. The pressure isn't just about the time and money, it's about the expectations. Every time I hint that I might not host the next one, my mother simply dismisses it with remarks like, "But you're so good at it," or "It wouldn't be the same anywhere else." I even attempted to bring it up gently last Christmas, saying something like, "Perhaps it's time to pass the torch." My mother just looked at me and asked, "Well, where else would we go?" My brother, of course, didn't step in to offer his place. He just nodded along as if he had no involvement. I couldn't help but feel a bit resentful. It's not as if he lacks the space or the means to help out. He simply doesn't want the inconvenience. Meanwhile, I'm left dealing with credit card debt because I keep trying to make each holiday special. I've been postponing having a serious conversation with them, primarily because I'm concerned about their reaction. My parents are very traditional, and I know they'd be disappointed if I stopped hosting. They'd view it as me abandoning the family legacy. But it's not just about the money or the effort anymore. It's the fact that I feel unappreciated. For years, I've endured it, telling myself it's worth it to keep the family together. But lately, I'm beginning to question if it's truly worth the toll it's taking on me. I used to cherish the holidays, but now I simply dread them. I dread the planning, the cooking, the cleaning, and the feeling of being overlooked. It's not a good position to be in, and I know that if I don't make a change soon, I'm going to end up resenting my family even more. So here I am, contemplating how to inform them that I need a break. I know it's going to cause conflict. My family doesn't handle change well. But for the first time, I feel like I need to prioritize myself, even if it means disrupting the status quo. I just hope they understand, or at least try to, before it's too late. Update 1. So I decided to take the plunge. I invited my parents and my brother over for brunch at my place, thinking it would be easier to explain everything in person without distractions. I prepared an elaborate meal. Eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, the works. The atmosphere was cheerful when they arrived. My father began discussing his golf game, my mother inquired about my neighbor's new dog, and my brother was engrossed in his phone while his children played in the corner. It felt like a typical Sunday morning. Once everyone had eaten, I decided it was the opportune moment. I cleared my throat and informed them that I needed to discuss the upcoming holidays. As soon as I mentioned it, my mother's smile faded, and my brother ceased scrolling. My father continued eating, but I could see the curiosity in his eyes. I went straight into it, explaining that hosting was becoming too much for me. I spoke about the costs, how I've been putting everything on my credit card, and how I haven't truly been able to enjoy the holidays myself. For a few seconds there was just silence. My father eventually broke it, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. He said something about how it wasn't a major issue and that the family could contribute a little more this year, but he didn't seem to grasp the full extent. I attempted to explain that it wasn't solely about the money, it was also about the time and effort. I reminded them about the dishwasher breaking last Thanksgiving, how I'd been left doing dishes while everyone else was relaxing. I could see my mother beginning to frown, her face taking on that strained expression she always gets when she dislikes what she's hearing. My mother interjected, talking about how my grandmother had hosted every year without ever complaining, and how it kept the family close. She recalled memories of my grandmother's old house, how it had always felt like home and how she thought I'd been doing an excellent job continuing that tradition. I simply nodded along at first, but then I tried to tell her that things were different now. Grandma didn't have to host 20 people while balancing a full-time job, and the costs back then weren't what they are now. My brother didn't seem interested in the specifics. He just shrugged as if he couldn't comprehend why it was such a significant issue. He made a comment about how we'd figure it out, but he offered no ideas or solutions. It was the same old pattern. No responsibility on his part, just expectations that I would continue as usual. I could feel my frustration rising, but I maintained a calm tone. I brought up the idea that perhaps he and his wife could host this year. He immediately deflected, stating that with the children, their place simply wasn't suitable for hosting a large family event. It was almost as if he'd prepared the excuse beforehand. Then my mother shifted her approach. She began discussing how much the children looked forward to Christmas at my place, how they'd be disappointed if they couldn't have it there. It was subtle, but I could feel the pressure in her words. She spoke about how the children's eyes light up when they see my decorations, and how much they love the small traditions I'd kept alive. I bit my tongue for a moment, letting her finish, but I knew I couldn't back down this time. I reiterated that I needed a break and suggested that perhaps we could start rotating the hosting duties. I tried to keep things as gentle as possible, but I could tell they weren't pleased. My brother mumbled something under his breath about how some people just aren't as generous as others. I didn't respond, but it stung. He didn't have to say it aloud for me to know what he meant. By that point, the atmosphere was completely different from when we'd started. My father looked annoyed, my mother was staring down at her coffee cup, and my brother just seemed irritated. It wasn't exactly the supportive conversation I'd hoped for. I cleared the plates and tried to keep things moving, but the energy was off. My parents didn't stay long after that, saying they had errands to run. My brother left with barely a goodbye, and the brunch just kind of diminished. Later that evening, my phone vibrated with a lengthy text from my mother. She elaborated on how much the holidays meant to the family, how it was important to preserve traditions, and how she hoped I'd reconsider. I could almost hear her voice as I read it, the same tone she'd used when I'd gotten into trouble as a child. It was all about the family and how much they'd miss spending time together if I withdrew. I ended up calling a few friends after that, just to unburden myself. They were far more understanding than my family had been. They told me I wasn't being unreasonable, that it made sense to desire a break after so many years. It felt good to have someone on my side for once, even if it wasn't my family. One of my friends suggested I post about it on Reddit, so I did. I wrote out the entire situation on one of those family drama subreddits, attempting to keep it anonymous. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of comments poured in, with people telling me to stand firm, that it wasn't fair for my family to expect so much from me without contributing. Some people shared their own stories about similar situations, and it made me feel a little less alone. There were a few comments labeling me selfish, but for the most part, people seemed to grasp my perspective. By the end of the night, I felt a little more confident about my decision. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew there would be more conflict to come, but I wasn't going to back down this time. I realized that if I kept letting them manipulate me, nothing would ever change. I just had to hope that they'd eventually come around, even if it meant some tension along the way. Update 2: Not long after that brunch, I started hearing hushed remarks. My cousin, who is 29, contacted me on a Wednesday evening unexpectedly. We've always been on good terms, but we don't usually chat outside of family gatherings, so when I saw her name appear on my phone, I suspected something was amiss. She informed me she'd been speaking with my brother and his wife, and apparently, they weren't pleased about my decision to step back from hosting. She said they'd been telling other relatives that I was being selfish for refusing to uphold the tradition. According to them, I was the one disrupting the family. She didn't sugarcoat it. She told me directly that they were portraying me as the antagonist, the one causing all this unnecessary drama, and it stung. I hadn't expected my brother to go that far, but I suppose he felt he needed to gain favor with the rest of the family. And then came the family group chat commotion. A few days later, I'm fairly certain it was my mother, posted a message about how much they'd miss our usual Christmas at my place. It was vague, but the intention was clear. A few aunts and cousins chimed in, remarking how different it would feel and how it wouldn't be the same. Nobody mentioned me directly, but it was as if everyone knew who they were talking about. It made me feel like I'd disrupted the family's plans, like I was the one ruining their holiday. My cousin messaged me privately again after that, saying she understood why I wanted to take a step back. She even admitted she was frustrated with how nobody ever helped out when I hosted, how they all just showed up, ate and left. It was comforting to know someone saw things from my point of view. She also let slip a small secret that surprised me. My brother and his wife were planning a vacation to Europe next summer. They've been saving for it for a while now. I was astonished. Here's my brother complaining that I'm being selfish, refusing to contribute to holiday expenses. Yet meanwhile, he's planning a luxurious trip. The same person who acted like contributing a little for Christmas dinner was too much to ask. It felt like a punch to the gut. I considered confronting him about it immediately, but I decided to wait. I needed time to figure out what to say without worsening the entire situation. The tension with my parents didn't subside either. They kept calling every few days, asking if I'd changed my mind yet about hosting Christmas. It was as if they thought I'd eventually give in if they maintained the pressure. Each call was a reminder that they hadn't truly heard me back at that brunch. It was always the same thing. How it wouldn't feel like Christmas if we didn't gather at my place, how my grandma would want the tradition to continue. They didn't seem to realize that I needed a break, or they simply didn't care. At this point, I was beginning to feel the weight of everything I'd invested in these holidays. One night, I sat down with my receipts and credit card statements from the past few years. I calculated how much I'd spent on food, decorations, gifts, and everything else that went into making each holiday special. When I saw the total, I couldn't believe it. It was enough for a down payment on a car. I'd been spending all this money to maintain a tradition that no one else even bothered to financially support. It made me feel foolish, but more than that, it made me angry. That cousin of mine was the only one offering any kind of assistance. She suggested hosting a small holiday gathering herself this year, something different just for a change of pace. It was a kind gesture and I appreciated it. So I brought up the idea to my parents. I told them maybe we could go to her place this year, keep it low-key, but they dismissed it almost immediately, saying it wouldn't be the same as it is at my house. They acted like I hadn't even said anything, and the conversation shifted back to their usual guilt-tripping. Eventually, I had a private conversation with my brother. I tried to keep it casual as if I wasn't too bothered, but I brought up the vacation plans I'd heard about. He became defensive right away, accusing me of being envious. He saw no connection between that trip and what I'd been asking for. He acted as if they were two completely separate matters. His trip was their reward for saving up, while me asking for help was me being unreasonable. We went back and forth for a bit, but I could tell he wasn't going to change his mind. He kept insisting that I was overreacting, that I was the one making things difficult. After that, things became strained between us. We'd see each other at smaller family get-togethers, and there was this tension in the air. Our conversations were brief, with uncomfortable silences in between. It was as if there was an unspoken issue between us now, and neither of us wanted to address it directly in front of the rest of the family. My parents noticed the awkwardness, but they didn't ask questions. I think they assumed it had to do with me refusing to host. As the weeks passed, I felt more and more depleted. It was exhausting trying to defend my decision repeatedly. Every time the holidays came up, it turned into an argument or a guilt trip, and I was tired of feeling like I was constantly on the defensive. But even with all the pressure, I knew I couldn't back down now. I'd come this far, and if I gave in, I'd end up right back where I started. I just kept hoping that eventually they'd understand, or at least accept that I wasn't going to change my mind. Update 3. A few days after that tense discussion with my brother, I thought things might finally settle down. I was mistaken. One Saturday afternoon I was relaxing on my couch, catching up on a TV show when I heard a knock at my front door. When I opened it, my parents stood there. They hadn't called or texted to say they were coming over, which was unusual for them. My mother had that determined look she gets when she's on a mission, and my father was standing just behind her, arms crossed. They walked into the living room without waiting for an invitation, and I had a feeling I knew where this was headed. My mother glanced around the place as if searching for signs of the usual holiday preparations that weren't happening this year. My father simply gestured for me to sit down. They began talking about how they needed to have a heart-to-heart with me, how this was all about family traditions and keeping everyone close. My mother started in on how much it meant to her that I continued what Grandma had done all those years. She recalled childhood memories, how my grandma would set up her Christmas village, how the whole family would squeeze into her small living room for dinner. She even produced some old photos, as if she thought showing me pictures of past holidays would sway my opinion. First, I just sat there listening, trying to maintain peace. I knew how much this stuff meant to her. But as she continued, I felt increasingly cornered. She wasn't just reminiscing. She was attempting to make me feel guilty for even contemplating altering things. My father was leaning in, nodding along with every word, supporting her. They were treating this like some intervention, as if I needed to be convinced that stepping back from hosting was a mistake. Then my father interjected with his own angle. He stated that if I wasn't willing to host this year, then perhaps the family simply shouldn't celebrate Christmas at all. He kept saying that if the family couldn't be together at my place, then what was the point? It felt like he was delivering some kind of ultimatum, and I could tell he expected me to capitulate. But instead, something within me snapped. I'd been holding back for weeks, listening to all the comments and pressure, but this time I couldn't just nod and go along with it. I cut him off, my voice louder than I intended, and told them I was tired of being treated like the family's personal holiday planner. I said I was weary of feeling like I was just a host, not a part of the family. My parents just stared at me wide-eyed. They definitely hadn't expected me to push back like that. My mother looked shocked, as if she couldn't believe I was actually standing up to them. My father's jaw tightened, and I could tell he was about to interject with something else, but I wasn't finished. I told them that I needed a break, and that I wasn't going to change my mind, no matter how much they tried to guilt me into it. That's when my mother's eyes welled up with tears. She began talking about how she felt like the family was falling apart, and how she couldn't believe I would allow that to happen. She kept saying things like, "I thought you cared about keeping us all together," and I could hear the accusation behind her words. My father just shook his head, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. I got up, went over to the side table, and retrieved the folder where I'd been keeping all my receipts and credit card statements from past holidays. I laid them out on the coffee table in front of them, pointing out the costs for food, drinks, decorations, everything that had gone into making those holiday gatherings happen. For a moment they both fell silent, staring at the numbers. My mother's tears ceased, and my father looked genuinely speechless. But it didn't last. My father dismissed the receipts, saying that the money wasn't the real issue here. He accused me of being self-centered for focusing on the financial side of things instead of the emotional aspect of family gatherings. He said I was making this all about myself and not considering what it meant to everyone else. I wasn't backing down this time, though. I told him that if keeping these traditions alive was so important, then perhaps the rest of the family should be willing to take turns hosting or at least contribute more. I wasn't asking for much, just a little bit of fairness. But I could see from their faces that they weren't interested in fairness. They just wanted me to revert to how things were before. My father stood up, shaking his head, and said something about how I'd regret this when I was spending Christmas alone. My mother was still sniffling, but she got up too, wiping her eyes with a tissue she pulled from her purse. They headed for the door without saying much else. I watched them leave, feeling a peculiar mix of relief and sadness. As they drove away, a part of me knew that this might have altered things between us permanently. That night, I ended up posting another update on Reddit. I wrote out what had transpired, how they'd shown up unexpectedly, how the conversation had spiraled. I didn't expect much, but the response was overwhelming again. People told me I was doing the right thing, that I needed to stand my ground. They shared their own stories about dealing with family expectations, and it helped to know I wasn't the only one experiencing this kind of turmoil. Seeing those comments made me feel like I wasn't losing my mind, like perhaps I wasn't the villain in this narrative after all. I don't know where things are going to go from here with my parents, but I'm more convinced than ever that I made the correct decision. Perhaps this Christmas will be different, perhaps it will be quieter, but at least it will be on my own terms. Update 4. I was set on having a quiet Christmas this year, Just me, a pile of movies, and some takeout from my favorite Chinese place. After everything that had unfolded with my parents, I figured a peaceful day by myself would be preferable to dealing with more drama. I wasn't planning on contacting anyone, and honestly I didn't expect anyone to reach out to me either. My parents had made it clear that if I wasn't hosting, they wouldn't be celebrating. I assumed they'd stick to their word. On Christmas Eve, I was just settling in with a plate of dumplings when my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my cousin, the one who'd been on my side throughout all of this. She told me she was hosting a small holiday dinner at her place and asked if I wanted to join. It wasn't going to be a grand production, just her children, and a few of our other cousins. She promised it would be extremely casual, and everyone would bring something. First I hesitated. I'd grown accustomed to the idea of spending the holiday alone, and I wasn't sure I wanted to risk stepping back into family drama, even on a smaller scale. But she insisted, saying it wouldn't be the same without me, and I realized that I truly didn't want to spend Christmas completely by myself, so I texted back and told her I'd be there. Her place was inviting with a few decorations but nothing over the top like the kind of setup I used to do. She had a simple tree in the corner, and a table covered with food that everyone had contributed. It was a different atmosphere from the large family Christmases we'd had at my place. More relaxed, less formal, but in a way that made it feel more genuine. There were only a handful of us, my cousin, her husband, their 2 children, and a couple of our other cousins with their kids. Everyone seemed content to simply be together without the pressure of a perfect holiday. People brought dishes they'd prepared at home, from casseroles to pies. We sat around the table sharing stories and eating until we couldn't move. It was the first time in years that I wasn't rushing back and forth to the kitchen or worrying about making sure everything was flawless. Just when I thought the evening couldn't surprise me anymore, my brother appeared. He'd heard about the gathering through our cousin, and he arrived looking a little awkward, as if he wasn't sure if he should be there. He didn't bring his wife or children, which was unusual for him. He just walked in, hands in his pockets, and gave me a small nod. It was peculiar, but I let it pass and got him a plate. After dinner, he pulled me aside while everyone else was chatting in the living room. It wasn't like him to want to talk one-on-one, so I knew he had something on his mind. He apologized, fumbling over his words. He admitted that he might have overreacted to me stepping back from hosting, and that he hadn't considered how much work it truly was for me all these years. I decided not to mince words and brought up the vacation plans I'd heard about. He seemed embarrassed, shuffling his feet and mumbling that they'd been saving up for it for a while. He explained that they hadn't intended to hide it from me, but he knew it looked bad given how he'd reacted when I asked for help with the holidays. He admitted that perhaps they could have contributed more. I told him I wasn't upset about the vacation, I just wanted my decision to be respected. I stated it clearly. I needed a break from hosting and that wasn't going to change. I told him that if the rest of the family wanted the holidays to remain as special as they used to be, they needed to step up too. He nodded slowly, as if he were truly listening for the first time. It wasn't some miraculous moment where everything suddenly improved between us, but I could feel the tension ease a little. He promised we'd discuss more in the new year about how to make things fairer going forward. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a move in the right direction. We rejoined the group, and for the rest of the night, things felt a little less strained between us. My parents didn't reach out on Christmas Day, just as they'd said. It was strange not hearing from them, especially since they'd always made such a big deal out of family being together during the holidays. I tried not to dwell on it too much, focusing instead on enjoying the evening at my cousin's place. Still, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness that things had reached this point. That night, after I got back home, I posted another update on Reddit. I spoke about the dinner at my cousin's place, how my brother had appeared and actually apologized. The responses flowed in, with people saying how proud they were that I'd stood my ground and that it sounded like my brother was starting to come around. Many people reminded me that establishing boundaries is difficult, but it's essential, even when it means navigating some uncomfortable moments. As I looked ahead to the new year, I felt a sense of resolve. I knew things wouldn't magically resolve overnight, but I was committed to upholding my boundaries, no matter how much resistance I encountered. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about ensuring I didn't end up in the same situation I'd been in for the past 5 years. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a while, I felt like I could handle whatever came next. Update 5: New Year's Day arrived, and I had just finished tidying up from a small get-together with a few friends when my phone rang. It was my mother.